Hello and welcome to another episode of the Right Wing Report. My name is JP, and today I want to talk about Ben Shapiro and Milo Yiannopoulos. Alright, so the idea for this video really stemmed off of a question I was once asked, and it was, how do you resolve being a fan of both Ben Shapiro and Milo Yiannopoulos, providing their differences? And so that's really what I'm going to go into today and talk about, how I reconcile the two of them, how I develop my own opinions, and what I think they both bring to the conservative movement. Alright, so I'm pretty sure anyone watching this video will know who Ben Shapiro and Milo Yiannopoulos are simply because of their nature in the conservative movement, but I want to go over kind of what they do real quick. So both of them do they do speaking tours, free speech advocates. The main difference is that Milo is more of a provocateur, and we'll talk about that later, and Ben Shapiro is, cold hard facts don't care about your feelings. Ben Shapiro went to Harvard Law. He has his own show on the Daily Wire called The Ben Shapiro Show. And then Milo is currently is a senior editor at Breitbart, and then Ben Shapiro formerly worked for Breitbart, and that's kind of one of the conflicts between the two of them. But I just want to talk more about where I discovered these individuals. So Ben Shapiro has been a key player in the conservative arena for a very long time. He's been writing books since he was 17 years old, so I really need to catch up, and has been pissing people off since then, and probably before that. I first really got to know what he was doing in 2012 with the Newtown shooting, and he was on Piers Morgan. And Piers Morgan, of course, used to be on CNN, and Piers Morgan was debating him on gun control. And Ben Shapiro came in and threw down a Constitution. He said, "I brought this for you, Piers. It's the Constitution, so you can read it." And since then, I've carried a Constitution most days whenever I can, a pocket Constitution from Cato Institute, and I think that's important. And that makes me a nerd, but Ben Shapiro did that on Piers Morgan. And then the Thug Life videos, of course, are very popular, and I've seen a lot of those. And the Thug Life videos, of course, brought way to me watching more of his longer speeches. Now, Milo, most people who know about Milo know about him from the Twitter thing, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I really knew about Milo first after, still pretty recently after the Orlando shooting. And so there was a picture circulating of him carrying a handbag and an AK-47 saying "We shoot back," and I was like, this guy's pretty cool. And then I believe after that is when the whole Twitter thing happened. And so Ghostbusters, obviously everyone knows about Ghostbusters, did not do well. I could talk about Ghostbusters, but most of what I would say would just be a regurgitation of what Gavin McKenna said on the Rebel Media, so I would recommend you go check that out. It's pretty hilarious. But so my ex-girlfriend, my girlfriend at the time when that movie came out, was a feminist. Don't do it, guys. Don't do it. It doesn't work. But she was excited for the movie. I was personally not excited for the movie. But after the whole thing came out, and I had already heard about Milo gets on Twitter, and the whole Twitter thing happens, and I was like, oh, this guy's pretty cool. Then he gets banned from Twitter, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to follow him on Instagram and start watching his videos. And I think that's, I'll talk about this later, but I think the controversy surrounding Milo Yiannopoulos makes him more powerful. And I think Ben Shapiro recognizes this, whether he thinks it's a positive or negative. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll talk about that later. But that's just a little bit about Milo and Ben. Alright, so since this is really my personal response to the question of Ben versus Milo, I started by talking about how I really got to know the two of them, in the conservative movement, watching their videos. And then, of course, as soon as I start watching their videos, after a while, I realized that the two of them don't get along. And, when I started watching a lot of their, longer videos and not just clips of them roasting people, I started realizing that there had been a long brewing conflict between the two of them. So without getting into the full history, because I find it to be, I won't say disgusting, but just it's boring, and it's kind of sad to see the conservative movement broken up like this. But I do understand why they have their differences, and we're going to talk about that. So Ben Shapiro is very pure conservative, and so he did not like Trump that much. And Milo Yiannopoulos was more of a Trump fan, and basically that started, they're trading insults on this whole thing. So Ben Shapiro will go out and call Milo a fake conservative and a provocateur, which, he's a provocateur. He admits that himself. And then Milo has, repeatedly joked about his height. His supporters have made racial slurs, called him a cuck, all sorts of stuff like that. Ben Shapiro has said that Milo was unintelligent, and then they had this thing where they were going to debate, and then, without going into the whole thing, because I find it to be absurd, Milo, says he's going to debate Ben Shapiro. They're like, okay, let's set up a time. And Ben Shapiro's like, well, you didn't answer my email within, after 2 weeks. And Milo's like, well, I'm busy. And then so, of course, Milo's like, well, I'm so busy, I couldn't respond to the email. Then Ben Shapiro's like, well, I'm so busy, you have to secure a time. I can't hold these dates open. And it comes into kind of a hubris-laden kind of thing, and I respect both of them. But when it comes to this, they kept escalating it, their personal differences. So, Milo saying he's bigger than Ben Shapiro and he's busier than Ben Shapiro, and Ben Shapiro saying, well, I'm busy too, and I'm busy, I can't hold these things open. So what I'm saying is mainly their differences are personal. Other than some of the policy disagreements on Trump, their personal disagreements are the main splinter between the two of them. And so I just want to talk about why I like both of them and what I think about their conflict. So Ben Shapiro really tends to be more aligned with me politically. I do agree with him on a majority of the things he says. However, once it was clear that Trump was going to be the front runner, I kind of had Trump acceptance a lot sooner than most people in the Republican Party. I wasn't a deplorable all the way. I liked Ben Carson a lot. But then once it was clear that Trump was ready and he was going to do some of these things, and I was like, well, I kind of agree with some of this stuff. I was ready to support Trump. Milo, had always been a supporter of Trump, calls him daddy and all that stuff. And then, Ben Shapiro, of course, says, he's not your daddy, don't say that. But I could explain all of this stuff. But really what I want to say is that Milo could stand to not joke about Ben all the time, and Ben could stand to not take everything he says too seriously. And I think if that happened, if that had happened a long time ago, they wouldn't have all these disagreements. And so I disagree with the notion that Milo's a fake conservative. I think he's admitted in some of his videos that if he was born a while ago, he'd be fighting the religious right as opposed to fighting the left, because he sees anybody who's restrictive, he's more of a provocatory, he's free speech kind of guy, and he sees anything as restrictive as bad. And so right now the left is restrictive, but in his opinion, whether I disagree with it or not, in his opinion, the right was restrictive back in the day. So I think he's admitted that he's not a through and through conservative, but when I listen to his lectures and when I listen to what he says, I don't disagree with the majority of what he says. And so Ben Shapiro came out and said something about how he wore an iron cross one of these times, and he made Hitler jokes and stuff. And while I would disagree with things like that, he hasn't, and they're saying his free speech stuff promotes that. I have yet to hear him promote some of those more, racially diversive parts of the alt-right. I don't think that, I don't agree with everything Milo did in the past, and I don't agree with everything the alt-right does. I would not consider myself part of the alt-right at all. And Milo says he's not he describes himself as a fellow traveler sometimes. But my point is, when I listen to Milo talk, I don't see any of that many problems with what he says. And so, Ben Shapiro's argument as well, he acts like he's this clean-cut conservative. He said something about him, acting like he's got this image, but really he's like this. To me, whether or not, he's done those things, he's done those things in the past, but if he's not promoting them now, I'm okay with that. I can disagree with what he's done in the past and only focus on what he's doing in the present. So that's my answer. In a lot of words, probably more than necessary. I don't agree with them all on everything. I think that a lot, when I look at it, I don't take all of the insults from Milo towards Ben very personally, and I disagree with Ben on some of the things he says about Milo, and I still like both of them. That's a very simple thing, and I've taken a little bit too long to explain that. But what I really want to talk about these two men is what they do for the conservative movement. And although they are at odds, they are spearheading a new generation of conservatives. And I think the great thing about Milo is he's getting in those people that are rebelling against, and the same thing with Ben as well. You have the tendency to rebel against your parents. I'm not like that. But a lot of people will tend to rebel against their parents, and it used to be that there were conservative parents and liberal kids, but now you have liberal parents, and they're part of the liberal establishment. And you have people rebelling against their parents to be conservative. And when you do that, if you haven't been politically socialized into that by your school, by your parents, then you have to go somewhere else to find that. And I think Ben Shapiro and Milo Yiannopoulos are both very good places to go for these newer conservatives, not neoconservatives, but newly converted conservatives, and they're ready to get into the movement. I would say Ben Shapiro I found the most informative. Milo definitely has taught me a few things I've learned from some of his lectures. But my point here is, regardless of their differences, they have both contributed a lot to the conservative movement, and basically any controversy surrounding them, especially Milo, just makes them stronger. And so whenever Ben has protesters at his rally, or whenever Milo has protesters at his rally, that makes them stronger, because people are talking about them, and people like me hear about them, and people like you hear about them and go and check out their message. And you can decide for yourself whether or not you agree with Ben's claims about Milo and Milo's claims about Ben. But at the end of the day, they are both in the conservative movement. They're both younger figures, and they're very popular, and they draw more people to the conservative movement. And I think something Milo talks about a lot is we have more fun than them. And although, I don't agree with Milo on all of his jokes, sometimes it's very funny. And then, he says, no one can resist the truth or absent a good joke. And whether or not he's telling the truth 100% of the time, I do like some of the things he says, and I like a lot of his jokes. Alright, so I hope you liked that video. I encourage you to subscribe and see what I got coming through the pipeline. I got a lot more where that came from. Go ahead and follow me over on Instagram at TheRightWingReport76 and on Twitter at RightWingJP76. And have a nice day.